On my 27th birthday, I sat alone in a café, rich enough to buy the city outside, but not rich enough to buy one heartbeat of love. The rain came down in silver sheets, drumming on the windows of the Blue Moon Café until the sound felt almost human. 1,000 knuckles rapping, asking to be let in. Inside, the lights were soft and forgiving, blurring the sharp edges of loneliness into something that looked almost peaceful. In the corner booth sat Sophia Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies, the kind of woman whose name opened doors before she even arrived. Her phone, face down beside a half-empty espresso, buzzed with a Tokyo timestamp she refused to check. The message would be about numbers, never about her. Across from her sat no one. Just an untouched Hermes bag occupying the second seat like a silent, expensive companion. 27 candles should have been burning somewhere above a glittering cake, surrounded by laughter and champagne toasts. Instead, a single vanilla cupcake waited in front of her, its lone candle swaying in the cafe's tired draft. The flame trembled, the same way she used to when she still cared whether anyone remembered her birthday. She leaned forward and whispered to the flicker, "Happy birthday, Sophia." And the sound of her own voice felt foreign, like it belonged to someone she used to be. Outside, traffic lights smeared red and green across wet asphalt. People hurried beneath umbrellas, their faces hidden, every one of them seemingly heading toward someone or something. She wondered when she had stopped being one of them, when success had become another kind of isolation cell. She'd spent a decade building walls of glass and steel, but tonight those walls felt like bars. She had the penthouse view, the car that drove itself, the bank account that could silence any problem except the one echoing in her chest. Forbes had once called her the girl who conquered Silicon Valley. Conquerors, she was learning, often die on their own battlefields. The jazz from the overhead speakers crackled through the old wiring, a low ache of trumpet and memory. She stared at the candle again, at the wax bleeding slowly onto the pristine frosting, and thought of all the birthdays before this one, the crowded tables, the friends who'd drifted when she'd chosen ambition over affection. Each success had cost her something invisible, until there was almost nothing left to trade. Her chest tightened with a dull, familiar pressure. Was this what victory felt like? A quiet booth, a flickering light, a heart that couldn't find its reflection anymore? She almost laughed at the absurdity. A woman who could order anything in the world delivered to her door, sitting alone in a cafe that smelled of burnt espresso and rain. She lifted the cupcake, ready to end the little ritual, when the door blew open so hard it rattled the windows. A gust of cold air tore through the room, scattering napkins and sending the candle flame into a wild dance. The barista looked up, annoyed, but Sophia froze. A man stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone, water streaming from his leather jacket. In his arms was a child, small, pale, wrapped in what looked like his own flannel shirt. Her curls clung wetly to her cheeks. Her breathing came in soft, irregular gasps. The father's voice cracked as he spoke. "Please, just until the rain stops. My daughter." Sophia didn't think. Something older than logic made her speak. "You can sit here," she said, motioning to the seat across from her. The words surprised even her, but maybe it was the way the man held that child, like she was made of glass, that pulled the offer out of her. The barista hesitated, then shrugged, returning to her phone. The man approached, cautious, grateful. Up close he looked worn but solid, the kind of strength built from long days and too few breaks. He eased the girl onto the bench, brushing wet hair from her forehead. "Thank you," he murmured. "I'm Marcus. This is Emma." The little girl blinked up at Sophia, eyes the translucent green of sea glass. "Is it your birthday?" she asked, voice a whisper fighting exhaustion. Sophia nodded, her throat tight. "Then you shouldn't be alone," Emma said seriously. "That's the birthday rule." Sophia felt the smallest tremor in her chest, a forgotten warmth, an ache that wasn't entirely pain. "And what happens if I break the rule?" she asked. The girl thought hard, then answered with the blunt wisdom only children possess. "Your wish gets lost. It floats away like a balloon with no string." Sophia looked down at her single candle, its flame still trembling from the open door, and for the first time in years she realized how many wishes she had let drift out of reach. "Would you help me make sure mine doesn't get lost?" she asked. Emma's face lit, though her father gave a soft, tired chuckle. "Only if you promise to share your cupcake," the child said. Marcus shook his head. "Emma, don't bother the nice lady." "It's no bother," Sophia whispered. The word surprised her again. She hadn't been called nice in years. The father's hand rested gently on the table, rough from work, a contrast to her manicured world of glass and silicon. The moment hung suspended. The CEO and the mechanic, the stranger and the child, wealth and want sharing the same small pool of light while rain battered the city outside. The candle wavered, catching the glint of the girl's wide eyes. "Make your wish," Emma said. Sophia inhaled, closed her eyes, and for once didn't think of markets or mergers. She thought only of feeling alive. When she exhaled, the flame went out. Smoke curled upward in a thin gray ribbon, disappearing into the dim air between them. "Did you make a good one?" Emma asked. "I think so," Sophia said. But before the warmth could settle, Emma's tiny frame shook with a deep, rattling cough that made Marcus's entire body tense. He scooped her close, rubbing her back, murmuring something that sounded like prayer. Sophia's calm shattered. "Is she okay?" she asked, voice sharp with fear she didn't understand. Marcus hesitated, eyes flicking to his daughter's face, then back to Sophia. "She will be," he said quietly, though the tremor in his jaw betrayed him. His next words fell like stones. "She has a heart condition." The cafe's jazz faded into the background, swallowed by the steady rhythm of rain. In that instant, Sophia felt her own heartbeat stumble, matching the fragile pulse of the girl across from her. Something unseen and unstoppable had shifted. The candle smoke still twisted between them when Sophia realized the strangest gift of all. Her wish had come true the moment two strangers walked through that door. She just didn't know yet that one of them would change her life forever. Sometimes the people who save you are the ones who need saving most. The rain did not soften. It roared, thick and relentless, as if the heavens were washing the city clean of every secret it had hidden too long. The cafe's door closed behind the man and the little girl, shutting out the storm, but not the cold that clung to them. Water pooled at their feet, a small lake spreading across the tiles. The barista sighed. Young, distracted, more interested in her phone than compassion, and said flatly, "We're closing soon." Her voice carried no malice, only exhaustion, but it struck Marcus like another gust of icy wind. He shifted his daughter higher in his arms, trying to shelter her small frame from the drafts sneaking through the cracks in the old brick walls. "Please," he said again, quieter this time, a plea balanced between dignity and desperation. "Just until it lets up. My little girl isn't feeling well." His words fell into the jazz-filled air, where nobody answered. Until Sophia spoke. "You can sit here." The words were out before she even realized she'd said them. They startled her as much as they startled him. She wasn't a woman who made impulsive offers. Every decision in her world came attached to contracts and non-disclosure clauses. Yet now she found herself gesturing to the seat across from her, heart hammering against the quiet boundaries she'd built around her life. Marcus blinked, cautious. He glanced at the tailored lines of her suit, the gold watch catching the light on her wrist, the elegance that didn't belong in this faded cafe. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said simply. "Please." He hesitated for half a beat longer, then carried his daughter toward the table and lowered her gently into the booth. Up close, Sophia could see the dark crescents beneath his eyes, the rough stubble that looked more like fatigue than fashion, the hands that bore the faint sheen of engine oil even after washing. She'd built her career designing sleek worlds where everything gleamed. He looked like someone who spent his days fixing the things people like her forgot how to touch. "This is very kind of you," he said, his voice rough with gratitude and rain. "I'm Marcus." "Sophia," she replied automatically, surprised again that she used her first name. "And you," she said, turning to the small figure now sitting beside him. "Must be the bravest person I've ever seen." Emma lifted her head. Her hair, a tangle of wet curls, framed a face too pale for a child. But her eyes, those astonishing green eyes, were bright with curiosity. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi." Sophia smiled, awkward, unsure when she'd last spoken to a child. Emma's gaze dropped to the cupcake still sitting between them, the candle stub curling in cooled wax. "Is it your birthday?" she asked. Sophia nodded. "Happy birthday," the little girl said with complete sincerity. "Daddy, we should sing." Marcus chuckled softly. "Emma, she doesn't need us to—" "Everyone needs someone to sing," the child interrupted, a whisper of stubborn conviction. "You're not supposed to be alone on your birthday. That's the rule." The rule. The words fell into Sophia's chest like stones in water, rippling outward, touching places she thought were long dead. "What happens," she asked carefully, "if someone breaks that rule?" Emma tilted her head, thinking, the seriousness of her expression almost comical in its innocence. "Then their wish gets lost. It floats away like a balloon without a string." Sophia felt her breath catch. For a fleeting moment she saw herself exactly as she was, a woman surrounded by everything she thought she wanted, yet tethered to nothing. "Then maybe you'd better help me make a wish that doesn't get lost," she said softly. Emma beamed. Marcus smiled too, though the fatigue in his face didn't ease. "All right," he said, surrendering to his daughter's delight. The barista rolled her eyes, but turned the music down a notch, maybe out of guilt, maybe curiosity. And so, in a half-empty cafe on a rain-beaten night, the strangest birthday celebration began. They sang. Marcus's baritone was slightly off-key, deepened by weariness. Emma's voice wove through his like silk through burlap, thin but pure. And Sophia, who hadn't sung for anyone since she was a child, found her own voice trembling between theirs, rediscovering how sound could carry warmth. By the time they finished, her eyes stung, and her throat felt too tight for words. "Make a wish," Emma commanded, "but don't tell or it won't come true." Sophia closed her eyes. The hum of the espresso machine faded. The rain became distant. She thought of all the wishes she'd stopped making, the people she'd let drift away, the version of herself who used to believe in things she couldn't quantify. When she opened her eyes again, she blew out the candle. Smoke spiraled, upward, soft and gray, a ghost of light. Emma clapped her hands once in triumph. "Now it'll come true." Marcus chuckled, shaking his head, but the sound was gentle, almost reverent. For a heartbeat, the three of them simply existed in the same fragile bubble of warmth while the storm raged beyond the glass. Then the bubble burst. Emma coughed, just a small hitch at first, then a deeper, rasping sound that cut through the quiet like glass cracking. Marcus's face changed instantly. All color drained from it. "Easy, baby," he murmured, rubbing her back in practiced circles. The cough worsened, shaking her small shoulders, stealing the light from her eyes. Sophia froze, panic flaring. "Should I call someone?" she asked, already reaching for her phone. Marcus caught her wrist mid-movement. "No hospital," he said quickly. "She's okay. It's just the cold air makes it worse." But his voice was too tight, too controlled, and the tremor in his hands betrayed him. "Emma," he whispered, "breathe, sweetheart, nice and slow." The girl obeyed, forcing small, shallow breaths until the spasms subsided. When at last she slumped against him, exhausted, the sound of her breathing was a thin whistle. Sophia stared at them, the image searing itself into her memory. The mechanic's calloused hands cradling the fragile child, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her damp hair, the way his body curved around hers like a shield. The world outside seemed suddenly smaller, the storm meaningless compared to the tempest inside this man's chest. "She needs to see a doctor," Sophia said softly. Marcus nodded once, eyes still on his daughter. "She has," he whispered. Then, almost too quietly to hear, "She has a heart condition." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. The cafe felt colder. The barista looked away, pretending not to listen. And Sophia, the woman who had measured her life in profits and projections, felt something break open inside her. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. The understanding that loneliness isn't always measured by who sits across from you. Sometimes it's the fear of losing the one person who keeps you standing. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Inside, the candle's smoke had thinned to nothing, leaving only the faint scent of sugar and wax and something undefinable, maybe the start of change. Sophia reached across the table, resting her hand near the little girl's untouched cup of cocoa. "She's brave," she whispered. Marcus nodded, his voice cracking as he answered. "She has to be." The rain lashed harder against the glass, lightning flaring white across Marcus's face, and Sophia realized that the strangers she'd invited in from the storm might just be the ones who would tear down every wall she'd spent her life building. Because the next breath the little girl took sounded like it might be her last. When compassion costs nothing, it changes nothing. Until it costs something real. The rain outside had turned merciless, the kind that flooded curbs and silenced cities, that forced even taxis to pull over and wait it out. Inside the cafe, the air felt heavier, charged with the strange stillness that follows confession. Marcus sat with his arm still around Emma, his hand tracing small circles across her back as she breathed unevenly, her small chest rising and falling like a fragile tide. Sophia couldn't take her eyes off the little girl. There was something devastating about that pale face, the way her lashes fluttered with exhaustion. Every instinct in Sophia screamed to act, to fix, to do something other than just sit there watching her struggle for air. "Is there anything I can do?" she asked, her voice low, careful, as if volume itself could shatter the moment. Marcus shook his head. "She'll be okay once we get her medicine," he said. But his words sounded more like hope than certainty. He looked down at the crumpled prescription bag on the table and sighed. "We were on our way to the pharmacy before the storm hit." Sophia checked her watch instinctively. 8:32 p.m. The clock on her wrist ticked louder than the rain. "Most close by 9, she said automatically, her mind already calculating options. "Which one?" "Fifth and Maple." He rubbed the bridge of his nose, exhaustion written in every line of his face. "But I think it's already closed." "It is," Sophia said quietly, recalling her assistant's schedule. Chen Technologies had a vendor on that same block. "They shut early on Sundays." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, shoulders sagging. He wasn't a man used to defeat, but tonight it dripped from him like rainwater. "There's one on 3rd, he murmured. "They close at 7. His voice cracked. "I thought we could make it." Emma shifted weakly against him, her breath catching again. Sophia could hear the faint rattle in her chest, a sound that didn't belong in someone so small. Without thinking, she stood. "There's a 24-hour pharmacy 12 blocks north," she said, already grabbing her coat. "I'll drive you." Marcus looked up sharply. "No, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she interrupted, her tone firmer than she meant it to be. "But I'm offering." He hesitated, torn between pride and desperation. His jaw tightened. "It's pouring," he said finally. "You shouldn't." Sophia reached for her umbrella, her movements precise, practiced, the reflex of someone used to solving problems by simply deciding to. "She needs that medicine," she said. And it's my birthday, so technically, if I want to drive through a storm, I get to." For a moment, he just stared at her. This stranger in designer heels offering to brave the rain for his sick child. Then, quietly, he said, "Thank you." Sophia smiled, a small, fleeting thing that barely reached her eyes. "Let's go before the roads flood." Outside, the wind whipped sideways, slicing through their coats as they ran toward the curb. Her car waited under the streetlight, sleek and black, the kind of machine that looked out of place parked near cracked sidewalks and flickering neon. The door unlocked with a whisper, and warm air filled the cabin as soon as they climbed in. Emma curled into the back seat, bundled in Sophia's cashmere throw from the trunk. Her small face, washed in the soft interior glow, looked even more fragile now. Marcus settled in beside her, trying not to drip on the leather. "This is quite a car," he said, half to himself. Sophia didn't answer. Her hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary. The rain blurred the windshield into streaks of silver, the city reduced to a watercolor of light and motion. She switched on the wipers, their rhythmic sweep marking the silence between them. "How long has she been sick?" she asked finally. Marcus exhaled slowly, as if releasing years of worry in one breath. "Since birth. She has hypoplastic left heart syndrome. It means the left side of her heart never fully developed." Sophia swallowed hard, the medical terminology slicing through her ignorance. "That's serious." "Yeah," he said simply. "She's had 2 surgeries already. Needs a 3rd soon. We manage with medication in between, but missing a dose." His voice faltered. "It can get bad fast." Sophia stared ahead at the glowing red lights reflected on the wet pavement. "You shouldn't have to go through that alone," she said quietly. He gave a humorless laugh. "That's parenting. Doing everything you can even when it's never enough." They drove in silence for a while. The hum of the tires on slick asphalt filled the car, the city stretching around them in glittering disarray. Every few minutes, Sophia glanced at the mirror. Emma's breathing steadier now, her small hand gripping the blanket like an anchor. The sight lodged something heavy in Sophia's chest, a kind of ache that was both foreign and familiar. When they reached the pharmacy, the automatic doors slid open to the sterile brightness of fluorescent light. The pharmacist looked up, startled, as the rain-soaked trio entered. Marcus handed over the prescription, his voice polite but strained. "She missed her evening dose. We need this filled right away." The man behind the counter scanned the slip, typed something into his computer, and frowned. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. "This isn't covered under your insurance this month. You've reached the limit." Marcus's jaw flexed. "What's the cost out of pocket?" $847. The number landed like a hammer. Marcus's shoulders stiffened. "Can I pay half now and the rest later?" "I'm afraid not," the pharmacist said, tone softening. "Policy." Sophia didn't hesitate. She reached into her bag, pulled out her black card, and placed it on the counter. "Charge it." Marcus turned toward her, eyes wide. "Sophia, no, I can't." "You can," she said firmly. "And you will, because your daughter saved my birthday." He stared at her, confused. "What?" Sophia met his gaze, unflinching. "When you walked into that café, I was sitting alone, pretending I didn't care. And then your daughter sang to me. She made me make a wish. She reminded me what it felt like to be human again. That's worth more than $800. The pharmacist hesitated, then took the card, running the transaction with careful efficiency. Marcus stood rigid, torn between gratitude and humiliation, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. When the pharmacist returned with the small white bag, Sophia took it and placed it gently into Marcus's hands. "Now she can breathe easier," she said softly. He swallowed hard, voice rough. "You didn't have to—" "I know," she said, "but maybe that's the point. Sometimes you do it anyway." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain outside softened to a whisper against the glass, and in that quiet, something wordless passed between them. an understanding that defied logic or pride. When they stepped back out into the night, the storm had eased, leaving the streets slick and shining under the street lamps. Sophia unlocked the car, watching Marcus buckle Emma in with careful precision. The little girl stirred, eyelids fluttering open. "Did we get my stars, Daddy?" she murmured. Marcus smiled faintly. "Yeah, sweetheart. We caught them all." Sophia turned away, pretending to adjust her coat. She didn't trust her voice. Back in the car, they drove in silence again. Emma slept, her breathing steadier now, each rise and fall a fragile miracle. The city outside rolled past, neon reflections and puddles that looked like galaxies under their wheels. Marcus cleared his throat. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "You don't have to," she replied. "Just take care of her." "I always do," he said, his voice steady, but his eyes betrayed the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting too long without backup. Sophia glanced sideways at him, at the rainwater drying on his jaw, at the worn lines of his face that told stories of every sacrifice he'd ever made. She realized she had no idea what it meant to love someone that much, to give without guarantee. For the first time in years, she envied someone who had less than she did. They stopped at a red light. The city hummed around them, indifferent. Sophia looked in the rearview mirror, Emma's face peaceful now, her lips curved faintly in sleep. Something inside Sophia shifted, subtle but irreversible. She whispered almost to herself, "You said her name's Emma, right?" Marcus nodded. "Emma Grace." Sophia smiled softly. "It suits her. Grace." The light turned green. She pressed the gas, her hands steady on the wheel, but her heart no longer was. As the car sliced through the glistening streets, Sophia realized that what she'd done tonight was more than an act of kindness. It was a promise she hadn't meant to make. And in the reflection of the windshield, she saw Emma's sleeping face, and understood, with sudden clarity, that the little girl's life might depend on far more than just medicine. A lonely penthouse finally felt like a home when strangers walked in. The city was still drowning in rain when Sophia's car pulled into the underground garage of her building. The elevator chimed softly, a sterile sound that had always meant solitude. Tonight, it carried something different: uncertainty, warmth, and the faint echo of a child's breathing from the back seat. Marcus stepped out first, his hands steady, but his eyes darting, as though expecting security to question what he was doing here. Sophia swiped her keycard, the doors sliding open to reveal an interior lined in brushed steel and silence. Emma, half asleep, clutched her blanket and murmured something about stars. When the elevator doors opened on the 40th floor, even Sophia paused. She'd seen this view 1,000 times before, the endless sprawl of Manhattan glittering through walls of glass. But tonight, it looked different. The storm had climbed into the sky, wrapping the building in low clouds that moved like living things. Through the fog, the lights below shimmered like distant constellations. Emma pressed her tiny hands to the window, eyes wide with wonder. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "We're in the clouds." Sophia smiled faintly. "That's what it feels like sometimes." The girl turned, her expression solemn. "Then this must be the cloud house." It was such an innocent declaration that Sophia almost laughed. The name hung in the air, transforming her cold penthouse into something magical, something imagined through a child's eyes. The cloud house. For the first time since she'd moved in, the space felt less like a monument and more like a place where people could actually live. Marcus followed behind her slowly, his boots leaving faint wet marks on the polished marble floors. His eyes moved across the minimalist space: white marble, gray furniture, steel fixtures. Everything too sleek, too intentional. A museum of success that looked allergic to fingerprints. "It's big," he said carefully, unsure whether admiration or discomfort was the right response. "Too big," Sophia admitted. "It's just me here." She motioned vaguely to the sweeping expanse of glass and chrome. I bought it because I thought it would make me feel like I'd made it, but all it did was make me realize how far away I am from everyone else. Emma had wandered to the center of the room, her small feet sinking into the white rug like it was snow. "Are those the stars?" she asked, pointing out at the fog-diffused lights of the city. "The ones Daddy has to catch?" Marcus gave a quiet laugh, kneeling beside her. "Different stars, sweetheart." Sophia watched them, something inside her softening. The sight of this small family in her immaculate world was jarring, like a painting suddenly coming to life. They looked out of place and yet, impossibly, exactly right. The air felt warmer. The silence she used to cherish now buzzed with a faint hum of life. "Let's get her the medicine," Sophia said gently, guiding them toward the kitchen. The open space gleamed under recessed lighting, every surface untouched. Marcus measured out the dose carefully, his hands trembling slightly as he poured water into a glass. Sophia opened her fridge, rows of bottled water, sparkling sodas, nothing human. Then she spotted a lone juice box, left behind by her assistant's child weeks ago. She handed it to Emma with a small smile. "Would this work?" Emma's eyes lit up. "Apple, my favorite." She took her medicine without complaint, sipping through the straw like it was part of a ritual she'd performed too many times before. When she was done, she looked up at Sophia and whispered, "Thank you, Miss Sophia. You have a really pretty cloud house." Sophia laughed softly. "You can just call me Sophia." Emma shook her head with the authority of someone 7 years old and sure of herself. "No, pretty houses need polite names." The room filled with quiet laughter. Real, unguarded laughter that didn't sound like boardroom small talk or polite networking. For the first time in months, Sophia felt her shoulders drop, her breath come easier. Marcus helped Emma out of her damp shoes, his movements slow, deliberate. "Is there somewhere she can rest for a bit?" he asked. "There's a guest room," Sophia said, leading them down the hallway. Her voice softened. "It's yours for tonight." The guest room, like everything else in the penthouse, was perfect but empty. White sheets, beige curtains, untouched pillows. Yet when Emma climbed into the massive bed, her small figure sinking into the softness, the room changed. She pulled the blanket up to her chin and sighed in satisfaction. "It's like sleeping in a marshmallow," she murmured. Marcus sat beside her, smoothing her hair. "Get some rest, Em," he said quietly. "Tell me a story first," Emma whispered. Marcus glanced at Sophia, embarrassed. "It's silly," he said. "I'd like to hear it," she replied, settling into a chair by the window. He nodded, lowering his voice. "Once there was a princess," he began, "who lived in a castle so tall she could touch the clouds. But she got tired of looking down on everyone. So one day, she took off her crown and decided to build bridges instead. Bridges that connected people who thought they'd never meet." Sophia felt the words hit her like a pulse beneath her ribs. A princess building bridges. It was too close. Too perfect. Too much like a mirror held up to her own life. "What happened to her?" Sophia asked softly. Marcus smiled faintly. She realized she didn't need a castle at all. She just needed someone to walk across her bridge and remind her she wasn't alone. By the time he finished, Emma was fast asleep, her breathing deep and even. Marcus tucked the blanket tighter around her and rose quietly. In the dim light, his face looked softer, younger. "Thank you," he said again, his voice low but steady. "For all of this." Sophia shook her head. "You don't have to thank me." "I do," he said. "You didn't have to open your door tonight." Sophia met his eyes. "Maybe I needed to." They left the door slightly open as they stepped back into the hallway. The living room felt different now. Less echo, more warmth. The city outside had quieted, and the fog wrapped around the glass like a curtain. Marcus walked slowly through the space, glancing at the artwork, the grand piano that had never been played. "You live here all alone?" "Yeah," Sophia said. It's strange, isn't it? You can fill a place with everything you want, and it still feels empty. Marcus nodded, his gaze wandering to the window. Houses remember, he said quietly. They can tell when they're missing something. What do you think mine's missing? She asked, half smiling. He didn't look at her. Laughter. Someone who talks too much. Someone who leaves fingerprints on the glass. She laughed softly, but it came out more like a sigh. Maybe you're right. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need to be filled. For once, Sophia didn't check her phone or glance at her watch. The ticking clock on the wall was the only reminder that time still moved at all. When Marcus finally stood, his exhaustion was written in every line of his posture. I should get some rest, he said, if that's still okay. Of course, Sophia replied. The room next to Emma's is free. He nodded, hesitated, then said quietly, You really didn't have to do any of this. Sophia looked at him, her eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. I know, she said again, but sometimes the things we don't have to do are the ones that matter most. After he disappeared down the hall, Sophia stood by the window, staring at the sleeping city below. The rain had stopped. The clouds hung low, glowing faintly with the city's reflection. She could almost hear Emma's breathing through the open door, steady and light, the sound of life threading through the emptiness of her penthouse. She turned to look down the hallway one last time. The door to the guest room was cracked, a thin line of golden light spilling into the marble corridor. Inside, Emma was curled beneath the blankets, one small hand resting on the pillow beside her face. For a moment, Sophia just watched her, this fragile, luminous child who had burst into her world like sunlight breaking through glass. The air felt warm, alive, human, and for the first time in years, Sophia didn't feel like a visitor in her own home. Standing there in the quiet glow of the cloud house, Sophia whispered to no one, Maybe I was the one who needed saving. And for the first time, she understood that the wish she made in that cafe wasn't lost at all. It had simply found its way home. The story of a princess who built bridges instead of walls, and the woman who needed to learn how. The night had settled deep over the city, wrapping the cloud house in velvet darkness and quiet hums of faraway thunder. In the guest room, a single nightlight glowed soft amber against the pale walls. Emma lay curled beneath the blankets, her tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with the faint beeping of the humidifier Marcus had brought up from the car. She looked fragile in that bed, too small for the world that had demanded too much from her. Marcus sat at her side, his voice low and even. Sophia leaned against the doorway, watching them with an ache she couldn't quite name. He was telling a story, one Emma clearly knew by heart, though she listened as if hearing it for the first time. Once upon a time, Marcus began, there was a princess who lived in a glass castle high above the clouds. From up there she could see the whole world, the rivers and the forests, the towns and the people, but she never went down to visit them. She was afraid the world wouldn't like her if they saw who she really was without her crown. Sophia smiled faintly. The story already felt uncomfortably familiar. Marcus continued, his eyes soft as they followed his daughter's sleepy face. One day, a storm came. The winds were so strong they shattered part of her castle. When she went to look, she saw all the bridges that once connected her home to the world below had washed away. So, for the first time, the princess decided to build them back herself, not from stone or gold, but from light, light that came from her own heart. Emma's small hand tightened around her father's. What happened then? She whispered. Well, Marcus said, his tone deepening. People started to cross her bridges. They came with laughter, with stories, with songs. And for the first time, the princess wasn't lonely anymore. She realized the light in her heart only grew stronger the more she shared it. Emma blinked drowsily. So, she stopped being afraid? Yes, Marcus whispered, brushing hair from her forehead. She learned that building bridges is braver than building walls. By the time he finished, Emma's eyes had fluttered closed, her breathing slow and steady. Marcus stayed seated for a while, his rough hand resting gently over hers. Sophia didn't move. The story lingered in the air, heavy and fragile like smoke. When Marcus finally stood, she stepped aside to let him pass. "That story," she murmured. "Where did it come from?" He smiled quietly. "I made it up for her after her second surgery. She was scared. So I told her about a princess who could build things that kept people connected. Emma decided that's what she wanted to be when she grows up, a bridge builder." Sophia followed him into the living room, the city stretching beneath them like a bed of shattered stars. "It's beautiful," she said. "The story, I mean." Marcus shrugged modestly. "It's just something to help her sleep." Sophia sank onto the couch, gesturing for him to join her. "It's more than that," she said. "It's about hope, about courage." He hesitated before sitting, his posture still guarded, like he wasn't sure how close he was allowed to get. Sophia studied him for a long moment. His face, worn from long hours and little rest, was still striking in its sincerity. He didn't carry himself like someone used to pity. There was quiet strength there, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. "You're a good father," she said finally. Marcus gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "I try." "You do more than try," she replied. "You work 2 jobs, study architecture at night, care for a sick child. That's more than most people would survive." He looked down at his hands, the skin rough and scarred from years of mechanical work. "I made a promise to her mother," he said softly, "before Sarah died. She made me swear I'd finish school, even if it took me 10 years. She said Emma would need to see me keep building toward something." Sophia's breath caught at the name. "Your wife?" He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "She had the same condition Emma does. Hers wasn't caught early enough. She didn't make it past 30. The words hung between them, raw and heavy. Sophia swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "I'm so sorry." Marcus shook his head. "You don't have to be. Sarah was light. She filled every room she walked into. And she left me Emma. That's enough." For a long moment neither spoke. Outside, lightning flashed over the skyline, reflected in the floor-to-ceiling windows. The thunder came softer this time, rolling like a tired heartbeat. Sophia turned her gaze toward the city, the sprawl of lights she once called her empire. Tonight it looked less like conquest, and more like loneliness stretched to infinity. "I lost someone too," she said finally. "My grandmother. She raised me after my parents died. She taught me everything that mattered, how to cook, how to keep promises, how to survive. She worked herself to the bone so I could go to college. She never saw what I became." Marcus glanced at her, something tender flickering in his eyes. "She'd be proud." Sophia gave a faint smile. "Maybe. Or maybe she'd ask me why I traded people for profit." He studied her quietly, then said, "You built your own kind of bridge, you." "No. Just one made of numbers and contracts." She laughed softly. "Yeah, and I forgot to cross it." Their eyes met across the distance of the couch. For a heartbeat, neither looked away. The sound of the rain had faded completely now, leaving only the hum of the city below. Sophia realized she hadn't felt this present, this alive in years. "What made you study architecture?" she asked, needing to fill the silence before it swallowed her. Marcus leaned back, his gaze drifting toward the window. "Sarah wanted to be a teacher," he said. "She believed in building people. I wanted to build places that made people feel safe. When Emma got sick, we spent months in hospitals, cold, sterile, windowless. I kept thinking, what if hospitals didn't have to feel like punishment? What if healing had sunlight?" Sophia turned toward him fully, captivated. "That's what you're designing now?" He nodded. "My senior project is a children's hospital, one filled with color and glass and gardens, a place where kids can be kids while they heal." She stared at him, astonished. "That's incredible." He smiled faintly. It's just a dream right now. A very expensive dream. Sophia tilted her head. How expensive? His eyes flicked away, the answer reluctant. The surgery alone costs $500,000. That's just for Emma's next operation. I haven't even started thinking about the hospital. I've applied for grants, charities, state aid. Nothing sticks. I make too much to qualify for help, but not enough to keep up. Sophia froze. $500,000. A number that rolled easily off her tongue during business meetings. A figure she'd signed off for ad campaigns, corporate events, marketing launches. She'd spent that kind of money to change perception, not lives. Her mind replayed the look on Emma's face earlier. The fear, the resilience, the quiet strength that didn't belong in a 7-year-old. That number suddenly felt obscene. How much time do you have? She asked quietly. Marcus hesitated. The doctor said within the year. Sooner if her symptoms get worse. Sophia pressed her lips together, 1,000 thoughts colliding. She'd built her life on control, on numbers that always added up, on risks that could be measured. But this was something else entirely. This was a number she couldn't ignore anymore. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees, unaware of the storm gathering behind her calm expression. I'll figure it out, he said. I always do. He stopped, exhaling. Sometimes I wish Emma didn't have to see how hard it is. Sophia wanted to tell him that she understood, that she knew exactly what it felt like to be trapped by the things success couldn't fix. Instead, she said, You shouldn't have to do it alone. He looked at her, startled. What do you mean? She shook her head, standing abruptly, as if motion could make sense of the thoughts racing through her. Nothing. I'm thinking. About what? She turned toward the window again, the city reflected in her eyes. About bridges. Marcus frowned, confused. Bridges? She nodded slowly. You said the princess built them out of light. Maybe it's time I learned how to build one too. He smiled, not quite understanding, but sensing something had shifted in her tone. Well, he said quietly, the world could use a few more. Sophia didn't answer. Her pulse was loud in her ears. The decision forming inside her felt impossible and inevitable all at once. She thought about every dollar she'd ever spent trying to prove she wasn't alone. About every night she'd eaten dinner with silence and screens. About a little girl who believed wishes needed friends to survive. And for the first time in her life, Sophia realized money could buy something far more valuable than prestige. It could buy time. Time for a child to grow up. Time for a father to breathe again. Time for her to become someone who didn't just build walls of glass, but bridges of light. As lightning flickered across the skyline, Sophia's reflection stared back from the window, her own eyes shining with a resolve she hadn't felt in years. $500,000, she thought. I've spent more on marketing. Tomorrow, I start spending it on something real. It wasn't a business deal. It was the beginning of redemption. Morning light crept through the fog that wrapped around the cloud house, turning the skyline into watercolor. Sophia hadn't slept much. The conversation from the night before kept replaying in her head. Marcus's quiet voice talking about his dream hospital, his daughter's heart condition, the number that had landed like a blow. $500,000. She'd signed off that amount last quarter to fund a marketing campaign that had done nothing but make rich people richer. For the first time, the math didn't make sense anymore. The numbers didn't add up to a life worth living. She stood in her kitchen, the marble countertop cold under her palms, as the espresso machine hummed softly. Her reflection in the glass backsplash looked foreign. The same tailored elegance, the same precision. But behind her eyes was something restless. The thought of Emma's small hand clutching her father's while he whispered bedtime stories had unsettled something deep inside her. Marcus emerged from the hallway, his hair still damp from the shower she'd insisted he take, his shirt clean but worn. He looked both out of place and perfectly right in her immaculate kitchen. "You're up early," he said. "So are you." He shrugged, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Habit. I usually start my shift at 6. Sophia leaned against the counter. You don't have to go today. I do, he said simply. Cars don't fix themselves. His quiet practicality both impressed and infuriated her. There was no room in his world for self-pity, no pause button for exhaustion. He lived entirely for someone else's heartbeat. Marcus, she said, her tone more hesitant than usual. What if you didn't have to fix cars forever? He looked at her, confused. What do you mean? She hesitated, searching for the right words. The wrong phrasing could turn this moment into an insult. The right one could change everything. I meant what I said last night, she began carefully. About bridges, about building something that matters. Marcus sipped his coffee, his expression cautious. Sophia, listen. She stepped forward, her CEO voice softened by something new. Sincerity. Chen Technologies just acquired a plot of land in Brooklyn. The board wants another office complex. Glass walls, expensive furniture, the usual soulless masterpiece. But I don't want to build another box. I want to build something that matters. A children's hospital. The kind you described. He blinked, stunned. You're serious? Completely. He laughed once, disbelieving. Sophia, I'm a mechanic with 2 years left in night school. You need licensed architects, engineers, design firms, not... I need vision, she interrupted, and compassion, and someone who understands what it's like to sit in a hospital room and wish the walls could hold a little more light. You have that, Marcus? He set down his cup, his jaw tight. You don't even know me. I know enough, she said quietly. I know you've held your daughter's hand through surgeries most parents couldn't bear to watch. I know you work yourself to exhaustion to give her a chance at tomorrow, and I know you've designed something remarkable, even if it's only on paper for now. He stared at her, eyes storm dark, full of pride and conflict. Why are you doing this? Because I can, she said, and because I should. He shook his head, incredulous. That sounds like charity. It's not. Sophia's tone sharpened slightly, the CEO returning, but with new purpose. This isn't charity. It's an investment. In you, in Emma, in something bigger than both of us. I'll put you on the payroll as a lead design consultant. You'll earn every dollar, and you'll have full access to our architectural team to bring your hospital to life. Marcus laughed again, but this time there was pain in it. You can't just walk into someone's life and rewrite it with a paycheck, Sophia. I'm not trying to rewrite it, she said softly. I'm trying to give you more pages. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Outside, the clouds began to thin, and sunlight pushed through the mist, splintering into shards of gold across the marble floor. Marcus turned away, pacing to the window. His reflection looked small against the vastness of the skyline. You don't understand what you're asking, he said. If I take this, I owe you. And I can't owe anyone like that. Not when I already owe so much to the world for Emma. Sophia moved closer, but not enough to touch. Marcus, you don't owe me anything. You said it yourself last night. The princess built bridges out of light. That's what this is. A bridge. You're not taking something from me. You're helping me build something I can finally be proud of. He looked at her then. Really looked. The woman who'd been on magazine covers, whose life had been measured in billions and board meetings, now standing before him asking for purpose, not profit. And for the first time, he saw what Emma must have seen the night they met. Not power, not money, but a deep, aching loneliness searching for meaning. His voice dropped to a whisper. You have no idea what you're getting into. She smiled faintly. I think I finally do. At that moment, Emma's small voice called from the hallway, sleepy and bright. Daddy? Marcus turned instantly. Hey, baby, morning. Emma shuffled into the kitchen, wrapped in Sophia's oversized robe that dragged along the floor like a royal cape. Is it still raining? She asked. Not anymore, Sophia said gently. The clouds are taking a nap. Emma grinned, her eyes shining. Then we can go catch stars again. Marcus crouched down beside her. Catch stars? Emma nodded solemnly, as if it were obvious. For the hospital. The one for kids like me. You said it needs stars to make the walls glow. Marcus smiled, then froze slightly as he realized what she meant. He looked up at Sophia, who was smiling softly. You told her? She might have overheard, Sophia said, feigning innocence. She thinks the hospital idea is magic. Emma tugged on her father's sleeve. It is magic. You just have to believe in it. The child's words landed between them like a blessing and a challenge. Sophia crouched down to Emma's level. Then we'll make it real, won't we? Emma nodded eagerly. You and Daddy can build it together. You're both bridge builders. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat working. We'll see, sweetheart. When Emma wandered off to the living room, her small footsteps echoing down the hallway, Marcus stood again. The weight of the moment pressed heavy on his shoulders. Sophia, he said quietly, you're making promises you don't have to make. I know, she said, but I want to. He exhaled, his pride fighting every instinct that told him to say no. You really believe this can work? I believe in Emma, she said simply, and I believe in you. He turned to the window again, his reflection swallowed by the morning light. For a long while, he said nothing. Then finally he spoke, his voice rough but steady. If I do this, if I say yes, it has to be on my terms. Sophia nodded. Name them. He faced her, his expression hardening with quiet resolve. This can't be about anything except Emma, he said. Not the company, not your image, not whatever guilt you're trying to fix. If we're doing this, it's for her, only her. Sophia met his gaze without flinching. Agreed. And in that unspoken contract, something sacred passed between them. Not a signature, not a handshake, but an understanding. Two people bound not by business or charity, but by the fragile heartbeat of a child who believed in stars. Outside, the city was waking. The storm had passed. Light poured through the glass walls, painting the kitchen in gold. And for the first time in years, Sophia felt like she wasn't negotiating a deal. She was keeping a promise. As Marcus gathered Emma's things, ready to leave for work, Sophia watched him quietly. She knew the rule he'd set was clear. This can't be about anything except Emma. But deep down, she already feared it was too late. Because somewhere between rainstorms and bridge stories, her heart had already joined the deal. 3 weeks can be enough to turn strangers into something that feels like forever. The days that followed felt unreal, as if someone had turned the dimmer knob on Sophia's life, and for the first time, she could see in color again. What began as an act of kindness had quietly evolved into a rhythm she didn't know she was missing. The penthouse, once sterile, sleek, and echoing, began to sound like something alive. Laughter bounced off glass walls. The faint hum of cartoons replaced the hush of expensive silence. Crayons and colored pencils spread across her marble counters like wildflowers reclaiming forgotten land. Emma was everywhere. Her artwork taped to the refrigerator, her stuffed rabbit perched on the couch, her voice narrating endless adventures from one room to another. Sophia didn't stop her. For years, she'd kept her home in perfect order. Every cushion aligned, every surface immaculate. Now there were juice stains on her coffee table and a purple handprint on her once white rug. And somehow, it felt perfect. Marcus came by every evening after work, tired and grease-stained from the shop. He'd wash his hands at the kitchen sink, roll up his sleeves and join Emma on the floor, helping her build bridges from Lego pieces. Sophia would watch them from the kitchen island, something quiet and warm blooming in her chest. It was domestic, ordinary, and it terrified her how much she needed it. One night, Emma spread a rainbow of crayons across the floor and pulled out a stack of printer paper from Sophia's office. "I'm making Daddy's dream," she announced. Sophia crouched down beside her. "The hospital?" Emma nodded, biting her lip in concentration as she drew a building with tall windows and gardens filled with balloons. "See?" This is where the kids get better. And this room has stars on the ceiling so they don't get scared at night." Marcus smiled from the couch, watching his daughter draw. "She's my assistant," he said. "The best one I've ever had." Sophia picked up one of the sketches Marcus had brought home. Blueprints of the children's hospital design he'd been working on in every spare hour. The details fascinated her. He'd woven sunlight into every floor plan, open spaces filled with art and color. She ran her fingers over the delicate pencil strokes, the dream made tangible in thin lines and measurements. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Marcus shrugged. "It's just a plan." "It's more than that," she said. "It's hope." He met her eyes, a flicker of gratitude crossing his face. "That's the goal." As the weeks passed, that hope seeped into every corner of the cloud house. Mornings began with Emma's laughter echoing down the hallway, afternoons with her paper rainbows taped to the windows, and evenings with quiet dinners that no longer felt like obligations. Sophia cooked for them, badly at first. But Emma didn't care. "It's good," the little girl would insist after every meal, smiling through overcooked pasta and burnt toast. Sometimes, late at night, after Emma fell asleep, Sophia and Marcus would talk, long, meandering conversations over tea that drifted from childhood memories to music, to dreams, to fears they'd never said aloud before. Marcus spoke of Sarah, his late wife, not with sadness but with reverence. "She loved sunrises," he said one night, said they were God's way of apologizing for darkness. Sophia listened, silent, moved by the way he still spoke, as if Sarah were part of every decision he made. She told him about her grandmother, about the woman who used to sit with her during thunderstorms and say, "The rain's just the sky remembering how to feel." When she spoke, her voice trembled, not from grief but from the shock of finally sharing. By the end of the third week, they had fallen into a rhythm so natural it felt predestined. Sophia found herself waiting for their arrival each day, for Emma's shoes to squeak across the floor, for Marcus's deep voice to fill the silence. Her work emails sat unread. The company could wait. The world could wait. For once, life felt like something she didn't need to manage. One rainy evening, Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, painting with broad, messy strokes. She dipped her brush in every color she could find, blending them until the paper turned into an explosion of light. "Look," she said proudly, holding it up. "It's a rainbow." Sophia smiled. "It's beautiful." Emma's expression turned serious. "Rainbows are promises." "Promises," Sophia echoed. "Uh-huh," Emma said. "Daddy told me. You only see them after the storm, so they mean things will be okay again." Sophia's throat tightened. She glanced at Marcus, who was leaning against the counter, watching his daughter with that same quiet, unshakable love. He met Sophia's eyes and gave a faint, knowing smile. "She's right," he said. "Rainbows mean you made it through." Sophia looked back at Emma, at her tiny hands smudged with color, and felt tears prick behind her eyes. She reached out, brushing a stray curl from the girl's forehead. "Then we'll keep one," she said. "Right here in the cloud house." Emma beamed, proudly taping her masterpiece to the window, where the city lights behind it made it glow like stained glass. In that moment, Sophia understood what had changed. Her home wasn't quiet anymore. Her life wasn't empty anymore. She was surrounded by laughter, mess, and love, and somehow all of it felt exactly like peace. Later that night, after Marcus had carried a sleepy Emma to bed, Sophia stood beside him in the hallway, the soft light from the guest room spilling between them. "She's incredible," she whispered. "She's stubborn," Marcus said with a smile. "Gets that from her mom." Sophia hesitated. "How do you do it?" He frowned slightly. "Do what?" "Keep believing. Keep smiling. When everything's uncertain." Marcus took a slow breath, his eyes on Emma's sleeping form through the doorway. "Because she needs me to. Because if she sees me lose hope, she'll lose it too." Sophia nodded, her chest heavy with unspoken admiration. You're stronger than you realize." He gave a small, tired laugh. "No, I just don't have a choice." They stood there in silence for a long moment, the hum of the city below them like a heartbeat. It was the kind of stillness that felt like trust. Fragile, unsaid, but real. The next morning, Emma woke early, bursting with excitement. "Daddy! Sophia!" she shouted from the kitchen. "Guess what?" Marcus hurried in, half awake, hair tousled. "What is it, Em?" Emma waved a paper in the air, one of the many mail envelopes Sophia's assistant had dropped off that morning. "It's from the hospital." Marcus froze. Sophia's stomach knotted. He took the envelope from her trembling hands and unfolded the letter, reading silently. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock. Then, slowly, his shoulders dropped, relief and terror colliding in one breath. "She's been approved," he said softly. "For the surgery." Sophia's eyes widened. "Marcus, that's incredible." He nodded, but his jaw tightened. "They'll schedule it as soon as I can prove the funds are in place." The air seemed to thicken around them, the promise of light suddenly shadowed by reality. Emma looked between them, confusion softening her smile. "Does that mean we can catch more stars now?" Marcus forced a smile, folding the letter. "Yes, sweetheart," he said quietly. "It means the race just started." Sophia watched him, the paper trembling slightly in his hand, and felt the familiar pull of time, the ticking clock that didn't wait for anyone. 3 weeks of light had changed everything, but now the storm was coming again. The difference was, this time, she wasn't going to let it win. She'd built an empire on truth, and now she'd risk it all for love. The morning of the board meeting broke sharp and gray, the kind of New York morning that seemed to smell like rain and steel. Sophia Chen stood in her walk-in closet, surrounded by rows of power suits, as if choosing armor before battle. She'd spent years learning how to dress like certainty. Charcoal blazers that cut like blades, heels that announced authority before she even spoke. Today, she didn't feel like the woman who'd built Chen Technologies from the ground up. Today, she felt like someone who was about to gamble everything. She pinned Emma's rainbow badge to the inside of her jacket, a secret the boardroom didn't deserve to see, and exhaled. For her, she thought. For Marcus. For something real. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. When the doors slid open, the familiar scent of glass, chrome, and money hit her like a slap. The boardroom was all edges and ego, 12 people seated around a table worth more than most homes, the city sprawling behind them like a conquered kingdom. "Sophia," said Richard Chen, her co-founder and oldest rival. His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Ready to wow us with Thornton's new designs?" Thornton. The lie. She forced a smile. "Absolutely." She took her place at the head of the table. Behind her, a massive digital display glowed with the title slide. Chen Technologies, a new era of purpose. For once, the words weren't just branding, they were a promise. Sophia clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. Marcus's designs, the children's hospital that lived in blueprints and dreams. The room went silent. "This," she began, her voice steady, "is the future of Chen Technologies." Richard frowned. "That's not an office building." "No," she said, "it's better." As she spoke, slide after slide filled the screen. Light-soaked corridors, family suites that looked more like homes than hospital rooms, therapy gardens, play spaces that felt like sanctuaries. The board leaned forward, curiosity replacing cynicism. "This is a pediatric hospital," Sophia explained. "Designed around healing, not just for the patients, but for their families. Natural light, color psychology, environmental therapy. It's architecture with empathy." Margaret Wu, the CFO, leaned back in her chair. "It's also expensive," she said. "That's prime Brooklyn property. The materials alone." "Will pay for themselves," Sophia cut in. "This isn't charity, it's smart investment. The government's offering enormous tax incentives for healthcare infrastructure, and the PR? Unmatched. We become the tech company that built hope." Richard narrowed his eyes. This doesn't look like Thornton's work. Sophia's pulse jumped. They brought in a new designer, she said smoothly. A young visionary. I wanted fresh blood. It wasn't entirely a lie. Marcus was certainly fresh blood, just not in the way they thought. The slides continued, but the boardroom air grew heavier. Richard steepled his fingers, studying her. You've always been about growth, Sophia. Profit margins. Market control. Why the sudden interest in hospitals? The question sliced through the air. She could feel the truth clawing to get out. About Emma, about Marcus, about everything she'd done for something that wasn't money. But that truth would destroy everything. So she gave them the only truth she could afford. Because I'm tired of building glass boxes that don't matter, she said. Her voice was steady but raw. Because profit without purpose is just greed with better PR. A silence fell over the room. Even Richard leaned back, assessing her in a way that felt different, less like a rival, more like someone witnessing a transformation. Margaret spoke first. You realize if this fails, our shareholders will bury you. Sophia met her gaze. Then I'll make sure it doesn't fail. One by one, the questions came, about cost, logistics, timelines, and one by one, she answered them like the CEO she'd trained herself to be, composed, calculated, ruthless when needed. But beneath that polish, her heart thudded with something new, conviction. When she finished, the room fell into a hush. Richard broke it. Call the vote. 12 hands moved, 8 raised in favor. The project was approved. Sophia exhaled for the first time in hours, her vision swimming. She'd done it. The hospital, Marcus's dream, was real now. Emma's surgery fund would be hidden safely inside his new contract. Everything she'd risked her company for had just come to life. Congratulations, Richard said, standing as the meeting dissolved into murmurs. You've got your miracle hospital. But Sophia, he lowered his voice, his tone cutting. Whatever game you're playing, be careful. Empathy doesn't pay dividends. Sophia held his gaze. Maybe it doesn't have to. When the room emptied, she stood alone, surrounded by glass and sky. Her reflection stared back from the windows. The same woman, but not the same soul. She wasn't sure if she'd just saved her company or doomed it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. We're watching the live stream. Emma says the presentation looked like a movie. Another text appeared right after. She wants to know if you won. Sophia smiled through tears. Her fingers trembled as she typed. We won. The reply came instantly. Daddy says you did it. I love you. The words hit harder than any boardroom victory ever had. Her breath caught. For a long moment, she stared at the screen. The line they'd drawn. The boundary they'd promised. To keep hovered there in 3 simple words. Before she could stop herself, she typed back, I love you too. She stared at the message, her thumb hesitating over the send button. This was the edge of everything, the point of no return. Then she hit send. The message delivered, a small gray check mark sealing the truth they'd both been pretending not to see. Sophia sank into the leather chair, the city lights flickering around her. She'd lied to her board, risked her career, broken every rule she'd written for herself. And now, with one message, she'd crossed the last line she'd promised not to. Across the city, in a modest Queen's apartment, Marcus read her message. Emma giggled beside him, clutching his phone. See, she said sleepily. I told you she loves us. Marcus smiled faintly, though his chest ached with a fear he didn't want to name. Yeah, he whispered. That's what I'm afraid of. Home isn't a place. It's the people who walk in when the rain starts. The smell of pizza filled the cloud house that night, blending with laughter and the faint hum of the city below. Emma had insisted on celebrating. Because big dreams need big parties, she'd declared, and Sophia hadn't been able to say no. The dining table that once held contracts and catered lunches was now covered in paper plates, sparkling juice, and glitter confetti that Emma had proudly scattered for good luck. A handmade banner hung crookedly above the windows. Written in colorful markers, it read, "Congrats on the Heart Hospital." Glitter glue dripped from the edges, but to Sophia, it was more beautiful than any award she'd ever received. Emma sat at the head of the table wearing a plastic tiara that kept slipping down her forehead. She'd insisted everyone wear one, even Marcus, who looked hilariously out of place in his. Sophia's was pink, his was silver, and Emma's was gold. "Now we're royalty," Emma said solemnly. "Queen Sophia, King Daddy, and me, Princess of the Cloud House." Sophia laughed. "I like the sound of that." Marcus grinned. "I don't know about king, more like royal mechanic." "King of fixing hearts," Sophia teased gently, her tone soft but weighted with truth. They ate until the pizza was gone, until the laughter faded into that comfortable kind of quiet only families share. Emma told stories about school, about how she'd shown her classmates Sophia's business card to prove her CEO friend was real. Marcus rolled his eyes, but Sophia was touched. She couldn't remember the last time someone had talked about her like that, not as a headline or a title, but as a person. After dinner, Emma insisted on a toast. She lifted her juice box high. "To the best CEO in the world," Sophia raised her glass. "To the best architect in the world," Marcus chuckled and joined in. "And to the best kid in the universe." They clinked, juice boxes and wine glasses colliding, and the room echoed with the kind of joy Sophia hadn't known she'd been starving for. For years, she'd filled her life with luxury, but never love. Now, with a 7-year-old wearing a tiara and a man who still smelled faintly of motor oil, her penthouse finally felt alive. Later, when Emma grew sleepy, she curled up on the couch between them, her head resting on Sophia's shoulder, her feet in Marcus's lap. The TV played softly in the background, but no one was really watching. The moment was too fragile to disturb. "She's out," Marcus murmured, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face. Sophia smiled faintly. "She always fights sleep, like she's afraid she'll miss something good." "She gets that from her mom," Marcus said quietly. "Sarah never wanted to close her eyes on a good night. She'd say, 'What if this is the moment the world changes?'" Sophia turned to look at him, her heart tightening. "And what do you think? Do you think this is one of those moments?" He met her gaze, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "Yeah," he said after a long pause. "Yeah, I think it might be." Silence settled again, soft, charged, alive. Emma's small hand slipped into Sophia's, her fingers curling instinctively. Sophia held on, feeling that fragile pulse of connection that didn't need words. After a while, Marcus shifted carefully, lifting Emma into his arms. She murmured sleepily but didn't wake. He carried her to the guest room, tucking her beneath the blanket she'd claimed as her own. Sophia followed, standing in the doorway, watching the quiet tenderness with which he moved, the kind of love that didn't ask for anything back. When he turned, their eyes met. For a second, neither moved. Then he whispered, "She adores you, you know." Sophia swallowed. "I adore her too." Marcus smiled faintly. "You're good with her. Better than you think." "I've never been good with anyone," she admitted softly. "But with her, it's easy." They stood there in the dim light, neither willing to be the first to leave. Finally, Marcus nodded towards the balcony. "Fresh air?" Outside, the city shimmered, alive with light and noise. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving behind a sky washed clean. They stood side by side, the night breeze carrying the faint scent of wet pavement and possibility. "You ever think about what comes next?" Marcus asked quietly. Sophia looked at him, unsure what he meant. "After what?" He hesitated. "After all this, after the hospital's built, after Emma's surgery?" She exhaled slowly. "I try not to. It feels like if I think too far ahead, I'll lose what's right here." Marcus nodded, his expression shadowed. "I'm scared of after." he said simply. Because it's the first time in a long time I've let someone in, and when you let people in, you can lose them too. Sophia turned fully toward him. You won't lose me. The words came out before she could stop them, before she could weigh their meaning. They hung between them, raw, dangerous, true. Marcus met her gaze, his voice low. Sophia, what are we doing? She opened her mouth to answer, but her heart did it first. In the way she looked at him, in the tears she blinked away, in the breath that caught between them. Neither of them moved. And yet everything between them shifted, all the unspoken feelings, all the boundaries they'd promised not to cross, collapsing quietly under the weight of what had already begun. For a long moment, the city lights flickered across their faces, and neither said another word, because they both already knew the answer. Whatever they were doing, it wasn't business anymore. It was love, and it was already too late to stop. They promised to wait until after, but love refused to wait. The days following the board meeting unfolded like a dream neither of them dared to name. The tension that had simmered between Sophia and Marcus since that first stormy night now lived quietly in the spaces between, in the way he brushed past her in the kitchen, in the way she caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. They never spoke about the text messages, the I love you that slipped across the line they'd both sworn to keep. Instead, they built something that looked like normal, or at least their version of it. Every morning began with coffee for Marcus, tea for Sophia, and a cup of chocolate milk for Emma, who now called their breakfasts family meetings. She'd sit between them at the kitchen island, swinging her legs and offering updates on her school projects or new additions to the hospital of dreams she was drawing in her sketchbook. Each page was filled with rainbows, stars, and heart-shaped windows. For kids like me, she'd say proudly, so they can see hope from their beds. Sophia had begun to think of that word, hope, as something she could touch. It was in the soft patter of Emma's laughter echoing through the hallways, in the way Marcus's presence made her penthouse feel less like glass and more like warmth. It was in the comfort of routine, the illusion that everything might actually be okay. They had 6 weeks until Emma's surgery, 6 weeks to breathe, 6 weeks to pretend. The first week, Sophia threw herself into the hospital project, pouring her heart into every decision. She told Marcus she wanted the building to reflect him, light-filled, honest, quietly strong. Together they spent nights at her dining table reviewing designs, her handwriting mingling with his blueprints. Their hands would brush over the same pen, their shoulders touch as they leaned in to discuss a detail, and every time it happened, the air between them changed. Not explosive, but electric. In those moments, it wasn't about charity or contracts. It was about connection. The second week, Emma asked to spend the night in Sophia's room during a thunderstorm. "The cloud house gets scared when it's loud," she whispered, climbing into bed. Sophia laughed softly and held her close, realizing how foreign yet natural it felt to comfort a child. As Emma drifted off, her small hand in hers, Sophia felt something inside her shift, something maternal, instinctive, and overwhelming. When Marcus came to check on them later, Sophia was still awake, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's forehead. He stood in the doorway, watching silently. Their eyes met in the dim light, and neither spoke. They didn't need to. By the third week, they had fallen into a rhythm so easy it frightened them both. Marcus would pick Emma up from school and stop by the penthouse for dinner. Mrs. Chen, Sophia's housekeeper, had started calling the girl Xiaoxin, Little Heart, fussing over her like a grandmother. The living room was now a chaos of coloring books and soft toys, the floor littered with Legos and crayons. Sophia no longer cared about keeping it perfect. She liked the imperfections. They made the place feel alive. Some nights, after Emma had gone to bed, Sophia and Marcus would find themselves on the balcony, watching the city lights dance below. The silence between them was comfortable, but full of everything they wanted to say but couldn't. One evening, he spoke first. Do you ever think about what happens after? Sophia took a slow breath. After the surgery? He nodded. I try not to, she admitted, because it feels like tempting fate. Like if I let myself imagine the future, I'll jinx it. Marcus smiled faintly, but his eyes were sad. You sound like me. Maybe I've been spending too much time with you, she teased gently. You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not, she said softly. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. He looked at her then, really looked, and the space between them dissolved a little more. Sophia, he said quietly, you have no idea what you've done for us. I think I do, she whispered. You've done it for me, too. He didn't answer, but when she turned toward him, his eyes told her everything. By the 4th week, their unspoken bond had deepened into something that lived in gestures. The way Marcus brushed his hand against her back as he passed. The way Sophia packed an extra sandwich for him to take to work. The way their laughter came easier now, as if they'd known each other for years instead of weeks. Emma, of course, noticed everything. Children always do. One evening, while coloring on the floor, she glanced up at them and said matter-of-factly, Mrs. Rodriguez says people who smile at each other like you two are in love. Marcus nearly dropped his coffee. Sophia choked on her wine. Emma looked at them curiously. You do love each other, right? Marcus cleared his throat. Emma. Sophia stepped in, her voice gentle. Love comes in lots of forms, sweetheart. Yeah, Emma said, nodding thoughtfully. Like how I love you both. Sophia's breath caught. She smiled through the ache in her chest. Exactly like that. Marcus met her gaze across the room, and for a moment, neither could look away. By week 5, Sophia had started writing again. Late at night, when sleep refused to come, she'd sit at her desk, journaling quietly. Something she hadn't done in years. On one page, she wrote the words, 6 weeks of pretending. 6 weeks of holding back what's already real. 6 weeks of not pretending at all. She didn't know why she wrote it or who it was for, but the words felt true. Because every smile, every quiet glance, every touch had already crossed the boundary they'd sworn to protect. And beneath it all was the same fear neither could shake. Time. By the 6th week, it hung over them like a storm waiting to break. Emma's doctors called with updates. The date was set. Surgery scheduled for the following Monday. Sophia was there when Marcus took the call. She watched the color drain from his face, the paper trembling in his hand. When he hung up, he didn't speak for a long time. She's cleared for the operation, he said finally. Dr. Patterson will do it himself. Sophia nodded, swallowing hard. That's good. That's what we wanted. Yeah, Marcus said quietly. It's what we wanted. But his voice sounded hollow, like he was trying to convince himself. Emma came running in a few minutes later, bouncing with excitement. Daddy, Miss Sophia, does this mean I'll be all better? Marcus knelt down, smiling through tears. That's exactly what it means, baby. Sophia joined them, crouching beside Emma. And when you're better, we'll throw a huge party, bigger than this one. Balloons, cake, the works. Emma grinned. With rainbows? Especially with rainbows, Sophia said. That night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus found Sophia standing by the window, staring out at the city lights. The air was thick with the kind of silence that only exists before something life-changing. She's ready, he said softly, coming to stand beside her. Sophia nodded. She's brave. So are you. She smiled faintly. Not really. Yeah, he said. You are. They stood there for a long time, the reflection of the city flickering across the glass. Two people who had tried so hard not to fall in love, standing on the edge of losing everything. When Marcus finally spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. It's Monday, he said. That's the day. Sophia turned to him, her eyes glistening. Then that's the day everything changes. Sometimes you have to climb the mountain to find your heart again. The morning of the surgery began in silence. even the city seemed to hold its breath. The cloud house, usually alive with laughter and light, felt muted, as though the walls themselves understood what was at stake. Sophia woke before dawn. She stood by the window, watching the first gray hint of sunrise push through the clouds. Down below, the city was still asleep, unaware that a 7-year-old girl was about to fight the biggest battle of her life. Marcus emerged from the hallway, already dressed. His eyes were red from a night without sleep. Neither spoke. There were no words big enough for the weight they carried. The drive to the hospital was quiet, the roads empty. Emma sat in the back seat, wrapped in her favorite blanket, humming softly to herself. "Are the stars still watching me?" she asked. "Always," Marcus said, forcing a smile through the tension in his voice. "They'll be waiting when you wake up." Sophia reached back and squeezed her small hand. "And so will we," she said. At the hospital, everything moved in a blur. Paperwork, nurses, whispered reassurances that didn't feel real. Sophia signed documents she barely read. Marcus answered questions mechanically, his hands trembling even as he tried to hide it. When it was time for Emma to be taken to pre-op, she looked up at them both and smiled. "Don't be scared," she said. "It's just another bridge, remember?" Sophia's throat tightened. "Right," she whispered. "Just another bridge." Then Emma was gone, wheeled through the double doors, a small figure in a hospital gown, waving with the kind of bravery that only children possess. And just like that, the waiting began. Hours stretched like years. The hospital cafeteria coffee turned cold in their hands. They paced the hallways, sat in silence, stared at walls as if they held answers. Every minute without news felt heavier than the last. At one point, Marcus sat with his head in his hands, elbows resting on his knees. Sophia stood beside him, unable to bear the sight of his breaking. She reached out, her fingers brushing his shoulder. He looked up, eyes glassy with fear. "I can't lose her," he whispered. "You won't," Sophia said, though her own voice wavered. "She's stronger than all of us." He exhaled shakily, his voice raw. "You don't understand. She's all I have." Sophia crouched in front of him, forcing him to meet her gaze. "She's not all you have," she said softly. Their eyes locked, tired, desperate, honest. The world outside that waiting room ceased to exist. "She's everything," he said again, quieter this time. "But so are you." Sophia froze. The words hung between them, fragile, terrifying, true. "Marcus, I know," he said, his voice breaking. "We said we'd wait until after, but I can't. I can't keep pretending." Sophia felt her heart twist. A painful, beautiful ache she'd been denying for too long. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "Neither can I." For a moment, they just held on. Two people caught between fear and faith, clinging to each other like lifelines. Outside, the rain began again, soft against the hospital windows. "I love you," he said suddenly, like it was the only thing keeping him breathing. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too." He pulled her close, and for the first time in her carefully controlled life, she let herself fall completely. The world narrowed to the warmth of his arms, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the quiet promise that somehow they'd find a way through this. Hours later, when the surgeon finally appeared, Marcus stood so fast his chair toppled over. "How is she?" Dr. Patterson smiled tiredly. "She's strong, just like her parents. The surgery went beautifully. She's stable." For a second, neither of them could move. Relief hit like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Marcus turned toward Sophia, laughter and tears colliding in his chest. "She made it," he whispered. "Our girl's going to be okay." Sophia's hands flew to her mouth, her body shaking with the weight of joy. He pulled her into his arms, and before either could think, their lips met. Not in desperation, but in release. It was the kiss they'd both been holding back for weeks, the confession their hearts had already made in silence. When they finally pulled apart, tears glistened on both their faces. "We did it," Sophia whispered. "No," Marcus said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "She did." They laughed, breathless, relieved, alive. The climb was over. The summit was joy. But the mountain had one more twist waiting for them. Later that evening, when they were finally allowed into the recovery room, Emma was small and pale beneath the white sheets, her chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. Machines beeped softly in rhythm with her heartbeat. Sophia stood at the foot of the bed, her hands trembling. Then Emma stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy but aware. "Daddy?" she whispered. Marcus leaned close. "I'm right here, sweetheart." Emma smiled weakly. "I had a dream," she murmured. Sophia brushed her hair back gently. "About what, honey?" Emma's eyes moved to her, still half lost in sleep. "About Mommy," she said softly. "She said you don't have to be sad anymore." Sophia froze, tears stinging her eyes. "She did." Emma nodded faintly. "Because now I know why Miss Sophia looks sad." Marcus frowned, confused. "Why, baby?" Emma blinked slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Because she's my real mommy." Silence fell, heavy, breathtaking, impossible. Marcus looked at Sophia, his mouth parting in disbelief. Sophia stood motionless, her heart shattering and swelling all at once. The machines continued their steady rhythm, but the room had changed. The child who had brought them together had just said the one thing that could unravel, or complete, everything. And in that fragile, holy quiet, Sophia realized she wasn't just part of Emma's story anymore. She was it. Miracles don't always come from heaven. Sometimes they walk in soaked from the rain. For a long time, Sophia just stood there, frozen beside Emma's hospital bed, the sound of the heart monitor filling the room like a metronome for everything she couldn't say. Marcus sat motionless, his eyes moving between his daughter and the woman who had somehow become part of them both. "Because she's my real mommy," Emma had said, before drifting back into sleep. The words echoed through Sophia's chest like a bell. Clear, beautiful, and terrifying. Marcus broke the silence first. "She's still dreaming," he whispered, as though trying to make sense of it. "She doesn't mean—" But Sophia wasn't listening. Her gaze had dropped to the chart clipped to the end of the bed, and to a single line of text she'd somehow never noticed before. Her breath caught. "Egg donor, S. Chen." It was like the world tilted sideways. The air rushed out of her lungs. She grabbed the railing of the bed to steady herself. Marcus stood quickly. "Sophia? What's wrong?" Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "The name," she said, her eyes glistening. "It's mine." "What?" I donated eggs after college, years ago. I was broke, I needed money, and I never thought I'd meet—" Her voice broke. "Marcus, she's mine." The room fell silent again. The beeping of the monitors felt impossibly loud now. Marcus stared at her like he was trying to catch up to the truth, to the impossible, miraculous collision of fate standing before him. "You mean—" His voice faltered. "Emma's—" Sophia nodded, tears spilling freely now. "She's my daughter." Marcus sat slowly, his hand covering his mouth. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, almost to himself, he whispered, "All this time, you were meant to find her." Sophia pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "All this time, I thought I was saving her. But maybe she was finding me." The truth hit like sunlight breaking through cloud. So shocking and yet so right that it felt inevitable. The child who had wandered into her café that rainy night had never been a stranger. She had been coming home. When Emma woke again, hours later, her breathing steadier and her skin glowing with life, Sophia was there, holding her hand. Marcus sat beside them, silent but smiling, a kind of peace in his eyes that she'd never seen before. "Hi, sweetheart," Sophia whispered. "You scared us." Emma smiled faintly. "Told you I'd be okay." "You did," Marcus said, brushing her hair back. Emma looked at Sophia. "Did you cry?" Sophia laughed softly, wiping her cheek. Maybe a little. Emma squeezed her hand. It's okay. Mommies cry when they're happy. Sophia froze, her eyes filling again. Marcus met her gaze. No confusion now, just quiet understanding. Later, when the nurse came in to check Emma's vitals, Marcus pulled Sophia aside into the hallway. The corridor was quiet, lined with windows that looked out at a sky finally clearing after the storm. So, he said softly, his voice still unsteady. What happens now? Sophia shook her head slowly, as if afraid to speak the answer aloud. I don't know. I never thought I'd have a family. I didn't even know I wanted one until... She looked back toward Emma's room. Until her. Marcus followed her gaze. She always said rainbows were promises, he murmured. I think she was right. They stood there for a moment, side by side, watching the morning light crawl across the floor. Finally, Marcus turned to her, his voice breaking through the silence. You changed everything, Sophia. For both of us. She met his eyes. No, she whispered. She changed us. When they went back inside, Emma was drawing again, a shaky rainbow stretching across her page, the words "Our Family" scribbled underneath in bright purple crayon. She held it up proudly. Look, I made our forever picture. Sophia took it carefully, her fingers trembling as she traced the uneven letters. It's perfect, she said. Marcus smiled, sitting beside her. What's that line at the bottom? Emma grinned. It says, Welcome to After. Sophia frowned softly. After? Yeah, Emma said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You said the surgery was before. Daddy said life after would be different. So this is after. Marcus laughed quietly, a sound full of gratitude and relief. Welcome to After, he repeated. I like that. Sophia looked at them both. This man who had taught her what love looked like when it wasn't polished, and this little girl who had unknowingly brought her heart back to life. She reached for their hands, one on each side, and held on tight. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a visitor in her own story. She belonged. The storm outside had finally passed, leaving the sky washed clean. Sunlight poured through the windows, painting the floor in gold. The machines beeped in steady rhythm, the sound of life, of continuation. Marcus leaned closer, his voice low, steady, full of awe. Welcome to After, he whispered again. The part where we start living. Sophia smiled through her tears. Then let's make it count. He nodded, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. We already are. Emma reached up sleepily, her hand resting on both of theirs. Promise? She murmured. Sophia squeezed her tiny fingers. Promise. Outside, a rainbow arched faintly across the city skyline. Fragile but whole, a final sign that the storm had done its work. Sophia turned toward the window, her reflection framed between Marcus and Emma. And, for the first time, she saw not the woman who had built an empire, but the woman who had found a home. The storm was over. Their family was whole. After, she whispered, smiling through the light. It's not the end, it's the beginning. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who still believes in second chances. And tell me in the comments, what did the after mean to you? Subscribe for more stories that remind us it's never too late to find home.